Viability rankings are a phenomenal resource in any tier. It's one of the first things you should be looking at. But even if you're experienced, it's good to go back and check them sometimes, because in the case of advanced, then you might say, oh wow, Metagross is really highly ranked. Now I know Metagross is always going to be a great Pokemon in Gen 3, but I wonder what's been going on lately that makes people rank it this highly. It might not be anything in particular. People might just say, oh, I appreciate Metagross's qualities more. Or maybe players have started experimenting with a new set that might have shaken things up a little bit. Now, the foundation of the tier is generally not going to shift, and it also should be taken with a grain of salt, because these are not objective. These are the aggregate opinions of the polled users who have been participating in the tournament sphere for the last 6 months, a year. I don't know. I think they get updated twice a year in Advance's case, so I'll say 6 months. So, you know, they're not law, and if the player preferences tend to lean a certain way, then it might be reflected in the rankings. I remember there was a few years where people were going, oh, Salamence sucks. Salamence is terrible for so-and-so reasons. I thought it was very silly at the time. And then a few months later, everyone was like, oh, Salamence is like a top 5 Pokemon. I thought it was kind of ridiculous either way, because I don't think Salamence is top 5. And I don't think that anything about the metagames at either time of those opinions was leading to men's deserving such extreme opinions. So that's just me, though, and excuse me for trying to say 16 things at once. The point being, take these with a grain of salt, but they are generally, a great starting point. They don't tell the whole story in and of themselves, but you have a good jump off to from where you can proceed. Also, it's, within the ranks, like, at the time of this video, before the update, which is why I'm making this video, then, yeah, okay, Zapdos is ranked 1 higher than Gengar. That's, I wouldn't take it too seriously. That could have just as easily gone the other way, so, yeah. Keep that in mind, and yeah, so since SPL just concluded the Smogon Premier League, then McMegan sent out the bat signal, the first VR update of 2023, so I sent in my rankings, and rather than make a giant forum post about what I submitted, we are going to do it video style instead. So, I will admit, I didn't feel like ranking a bunch of garbage. So, like, the difference between... I mean, we'll go over the stuff I didn't rank, the stuff that I think is worthwhile here. Like, I don't think that all of this stuff is complete garbage, but I really wasn't interested in differentiating whether Ludicolo was better than Raikou. I mean, okay, sure, Ludicolo, I think, is better than Raikou, but... and there is stuff here that I think is interesting, but we'll go through that at the end. So I pretty much stuck to what I personally would seriously consider bringing in a tournament. There are a couple omissions here that are part of the standard metagame, but that, like Smeargle, I don't think I ranked. But I just think that something like that, actually the more egregious omission, I think, is going to be Ms. Dravis, which, yeah, I do consider that a legitimate part of the metagame, but I don't know, yeah. So I didn't bother ranking anything that I personally would not consider using in a tournament, in a serious tournament, in some sense. So that is my personal criteria. So in terms of how I... number 1, separated these into ranks, and number 2, ordered them within the ranks. It's basically a combination of metagame impact, how consistent a performer it is in battle, how much it brings to your team, and how much it affects your own team when playing against it. So, some combination thereof. So, without further ado, let us, 5 minutes in, good lord, get to the ranks. So T-Tar at number 1 is actually slightly controversial. I won't go into it now. Those who know Advance know that Tyranitar has always been the undisputed king of the tier, but it's been disputed in recent times. Now, I don't want to get into it fully in this video because it's an interesting topic that deserves a more in-depth look. But there is some contention to whether it or Skarmory is the best Pokemon in the tier in terms of what warps the metagame more. I settled on T-Tar number 1 just because when you take Sand out of the equation, and, to say nothing of T-Tar's own offensive capabilities alongside it, but Sand being out of the equation really lets a lot of stuff run a little too wild. The basic gist is that Skarmory's spikes, if you pair it with Pokemon that are able to compensate for the lack of Sand, like a lack of Sand makes something like Suicune and Snorlax more threatening, so you run things like Blissey, Celebi, Zapdos to make up for, or Metagross for Snorlax to make up for stuff like that. And not having to run T-Tar to get the most out of spikes is a relatively new development in terms of how far it's been pushed. That's pretty new. And that's what's been leading people to say, oh, Skarm is number 1 because it just warps the tier to absurd extents. And I agree. That's why it's number 2 for me, up there in the same rank as Tyranitar. It's right behind it. But T-Tar's Sand is just too big, especially with how much of a threat Tyranitar is in its own right. Because a lot of the time, it sounds weird, but sometimes people will forget how threatening T-Tar can be. And I realize that sounds kind of stupid. So what I'll elucidate is that a lot of people will say, oh, T-Tar is so good even if it does no damage because of Sand, right? And that is true. But then you have scenarios where T-Tar is just kind of chucked on a team for Sand and doesn't have the most taken of its insane offensive capabilities. And if that's the case, then yeah, no wonder people are a little down on T-Tar, especially because Tar has a lot of weaknesses. It's not the toughest thing in the world to deal with. But I think with the resurgence of sets like Choice Band, and that's another thing about these metagame shifts. Sometimes people just forget that things like CB Tar exist for a while. So it's not necessarily about a Pokemon being bad or not. So, of course, then there are shifts, like major shifts, which we'll be going over later, one of which will also receive its own video. But yeah, Tar number 1 because insane offensive threat and Sand is the number 1 limiting factor in Advance. Even more so than Skarm's spikes and its walling ability. So, I mean, it's really neck and neck because Skarm is truly absurd. And basically, Skarmory teams of any sort will always be the most consistent teams in Advance. And that I don't think anyone could really debate that. It's part of another video I want to make about how defensive teams, or teams with good backbones at least, that heavily lean towards defensive play, tend to be the most consistent in Pokemon. And Gen 3 Skarmory and its many permutations tend to be among the best examples of that. So, but of course, T-Tar can create or enable so many teams that Skarm wouldn't fit in on. And so basically T-Tar can get slapped on any team, Scar, and do things that pretty much nothing else can. I mean, Pursuit Tar alone. And Skarmory cannot do that as easily, but it is almost as metagame warping. So that's why there's the S rank, or they're both in the S rank. So Blissey in A+, I really thought about putting Blissey in S right after Skarm. And I'm still kind of regretting it. In terms of the rankings I sent to McMegan, it makes no difference at all because I ranked it number 3. So, but in terms of my own personal, how I would differentiate them, then it is the top of A+. But I mean, Blissey is insanely broken. It counters everything. People worry about only having, say, Swampert or Flygon as their physical wall once Skarmory gets Magneton, and then they forget that, Blissey is also a physical wall. It's absolutely ridiculous. It shrugs off brick breaks and rock slides and hidden power flyings and double edges. It's absolutely nuts. And of course, it's got the most ridiculous move pool ever. It doesn't care about status because of natural cure. It heals its teammates with Wish. Sing is potentially the most frustrating Pokemon in the tier because it gets a million opportunities, and it getting a million opportunities against everything is why Blissey is so broken. It's so easy for it to just blank pretty much everything and support its team in immense ways, which is why I personally love Wish. I mean, like, Wish Jirachi is also an amazing Pokemon, but sometimes it has to stay in to heal itself, whereas Blissey takes so little damage from Pokemon that are otherwise so terrifying, like Zapdos, and it's like, oh, I don't need to heal, because I'm going to take like 65 more of those, so I can just Wish, and oh, look, Skarmory went back up to full against that Metagross. So, Blissey walls everything and is irritating to everything. It can do so many different... It can pull off so many sets effectively as well. Like, Calm Mind is great on Spike's teams because it doesn't have Spike's immune answers with Bolt Beam coverage. I know some people like Flamethrower, HP Grass, and I do like Fire coverage on Blissey because that makes it so much more annoying to deal with. Either Fire or T-Bolt is helpful for Skarm, but Fire limiting Metagross to switch-ins is just unbelievably good. To say nothing of destroying Cocky Fortress thinking they're safe. But I don't like Fire Grass as the coverage because then you go from being Immense Check, yeah, Blissey's Immense Check, that's how good it is, to being walled by Mence, which I don't really care for. If you're going to use Fire on Blissey, fine, but you got to have something to hit Mence with. And if you can afford a Bold Nature on your Blissey, I mean, it just takes so little damage from everything. Yeah, I always loved fitting it on my Wish Blisseys, and it's ridiculous. Like, even like max attack Zapdos HP fighting with spikes and sand, is not going to 2 a KO. It's wild. So yeah, Blissey, crazy broken. Right behind it in the busted department is Gengar, because of Will-O-Wisp. Now, I don't think Gengar is just a spikes abusing machine. I think it has a lot of... It's weirdly underrated on special offenses. It facilitates those really, really beautifully. But its ranking is for the way that it is one of the metagame's most limiting forces with Will-O-Wisp. Because there's a couple natural cure Pokemon, a couple fire types, and everything else gets burned. This isn't like newer gens with magic guards and poison heals, and it's not as easy to slap Lumberries on things with permanent sand flying around. And the fire types are not as easily slappable. It's not like generations with like Heatran. So Will-O-Wisp is really easy to throw out and do something. Like, even if you just do 12% to a Blissey, minimum, by the way, in sand, because that assumes that Blissey switches out immediately, then that's fine, because it's not like you're going to do much better with T-Bolt, and you severely limit... If you want to remember just how threatening Will-O-Wisp Gengar is, because a lot of players also get this idea, which I don't know where it comes from, because Will-O-Wisp Gengar is one of the most terrifying things in the team builder to me, but people get this idea, oh, I'll play around Gengar with offensive pressure. I'm just like, how? Part of the reason why I have things like Skarm and Bliss ranked so high is that offense doesn't hit very hard in advance, and so the defense, you have to be able to respond to things defensively. You're not just going to be able to overwhelm things consistently anyway, because offensive teams have their own problems, but you just don't hit hard enough for that. And so you have to be able to really ruin Gengar. If you're going to play around it with offensive pressure, fine, but your options are going to be limited for that. And go look up the SPL Finals game from the advanced one if you want to see just how ruinous Gengar can be to an otherwise perfectly solid team that was relying on dealing with it through offensive pressure. Ruinous stuff. And it checks everything with that speed stat, which gives it the jump on the 100s. It's got just the right amount of bulk. Yeah, it's great stuff. So Gengar is absolutely defining. It's it even pulls out tricks like Destiny Bond to ruin Claydol, trying to spin against it. It's terrifying with Dugtrio support in particular. Say nothing of Spikes, and yeah, defining stuff. Ranking Gengar low because it gets played around is just a sign that you're not playing people who are using Gengar well, because even when you know it's coming, it's terrifying. It's Gengar. It's one of those A couple of years ago, another thing about the viability rankings, it was I remember people were saying like, "Oh, Scar and Bliss isn't so good right now," and it kind of blew my mind because when I looked at the actual tournament games in which Scar and Bliss were being used, they were still absolutely dominating. And then, in spite of that, then people turned around and said, "Oh, it's not so good right now." And so now, in this newer age where the whole Scar might be the best Pokemon around thing is more common knowledge, I think kind of speaks to um, how that can change in a way that doesn't really make sense to me because I don't think there was anything different about the metagame back then. My estimation of or my appreciation of just how insane Scarm is always growing because Scarm never fails to impress. But the idea that it was not so good before was just it seemed fundamentally incorrect to the idea of advance. Because it's always going to take no damage from nearly the entire tier. Even super effective Fire Blast from things like Salamence are not coming close to KOing it, so it's going to stay and it's going to spike and toxic and protect and never die because it's immune to sand and spikes. So, and that is never going to change. And since it has such intrinsically good qualities, then it's always going to be good. And even if players start favoring Zapdos a lot, it's like, okay, were Skarmory users somehow not counting on facing Zapdos before? So I realize I'm going into one of my rants again, but it's just to remember that this is just how I ordered it right now. I could easily wake up tomorrow and be like, you know what, I should have put Zapdos ahead of Metagross. Stuff like that. So, if anything, I do think this video is a good idea of where the current metagame is for me in terms of the small stuff, but this video will also double as a basic picture of what the advanced metagame looks like. So, because it's fundamentally going to be, whenever someone says, oh, Metagross is really good in advance right now, I always say, like, as opposed to what? 6 months ago when it wasn't so good, when it wasn't Metagross? So yeah, Metagross is also really good because it does everything with Band. I personally just can't get enough of the defensive set with how it combines rock checking of T-Tar and Arrow while also handling Snorlax, which Swampert cannot do. Of course, Metagross's EQ weakness makes it more vulnerable to things like DD Ments and Dugtrio. But with the help of Wish Blissey, I just love it. Because it makes you not have to do stupid dances around Snorlax with your Gengar and your T-Tar, fearing like Shadow Balls and Focus Punches. And with Meta, you just completely stuff it. So, yeah, I personally like that. But the Agility set has really become popular. So, I think Metagross would likely hold this rank even without it, just because its intrinsic qualities are really good. But that Agility set has really taken off in popularity and shown how nasty it can be, specifically with the addition of Rock Slide over Explosion. And previously, the idea of a Metagross without Boom was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, even the defensive sets like Boom. Even when you were using, like, Toxic Protect Metagross, it was like, yeah, but the whole thing is that it's a bulky Pokemon that can still Boom. That's what's cool about it. And so, you're not getting blanked by something like Suicune. I still do think that, but now, I don't know, I do really like the addition of Rock Slide's coverage, just because not getting... I mean, Rock Slide's coverage is great on 4 attacks Metagross as well. It's a thing of beauty. But for late game scenarios, no longer are you getting, checked by that Zapdos, or that Charizard, that Moltres. You're actually hitting Skarmory for semi-decent damage. I mean, you don't want to try to solo it, of course, but with Rock Slide and Meteor Mash, you'll beat it on PP. In a last Pokemon situation, of course, especially with Agility, because as opposed to one Explosion, which KOs you, then you have Rock Slides. So you have that, and it's just a ferocious late game cleaner in the sense that it provides speed and a way of checking things. Now, this is not to say that a Pokemon like Arrow does not do those things, but it has been compared to Arrow in that it does do things like prevent, with its natural bulk, it takes those hits and has the speed to get the jump on other Arrow, for example, as well. And then bring the game home without locking into a move with Choice Band. Whereas Arrow has the initial speed, but locks into a move and does not have bulk to take hits as well as Metagross does, especially because this Metagross likes to run lefties. So agility lefties Rock Slide Metagross has really vaulted it up in most people's opinions, and so I tend to go back and forth on Metagross versus Zapdos, but I think that set has really entrenched itself as an enabler of offense, which often struggles to find solid, consistent late game cleaners. And Metagross is fantastic because, unlike a lot of other physical sweepers, can't get intimidated by Ments because of clear body. So, yeah, Metagross is fantastic, and it does it all. It has a ton of impact on the metagame, and it fits on pretty much every team, and it does a lot for your offense. And if you're running an offense team, you can never go wrong with Metagross. Even if you're running a special offense team, you'll still have some or a lot of use for it if you want to go with it. And yeah, there was something else I wanted to say. Oh, and yeah, it checks all the boxes. Metagame impact, does a lot for you when you use it, and it forces you to consider its presence in the team builder. So, for example, if you're running a physical wall that doesn't resist steel, then you are going to have to, the most common case is when you use Flygon over Swampert, then you're going to have to use something to partner with it, like a Metagross, or your own Metagross, or a Jirachi, or a Zapdos, or a Moltres, or a Charizard, something to help you out against Metagross's Meteor Mashes. Because Flygon will check, other physical attackers, T-Tar, Arrow, DD Ments, but it's not going to do so well against Metagross, because Metagross is the strongest physical attacker in the tier in the sense that it has such a powerful stab. So, yeah. Now Zapdos. Now, in terms of metagame impact, this thing is insane because it really demands a special check, and the number of special checks in the tier, good special checks, is really limited. So switching into this thing very quickly becomes a pain. I mean, because it's kind of like GSC Zapdos, that conundrum where the tier's ground types don't really want to switch into it. As Claydol switches into it, okay, well, you don't hurt it without explosion, unless you run Rock Slide, which is cool, but you still take a lot from Hidden Power, and it subs on you for free, and if you don't run Rock Slide, which is most Claydols, they tend to run Psychic for a Pokemon called Gengar. And, then you're just completely taken advantage of, and it gets ugly. Swampert, it runs HP Grass. Zapdos scares out Swampert. Obviously, you don't want to get too comfortable with it against it with Flygon, because runs HP Ice nicely to get better one-on-one against Ments, and also hit Celebi hard, diluting that Pokemon's effectiveness against it as a special check. Blissey is, of course, the best thing against Zapdos. Until Zapdos pops out a mix set, which is very, very nasty with spikes down. And then, other things like Regice and Snorlax are the worst counters in the world because of sand and spikes. But even with just sand, they switch into Thunderbolt, and then, Zapdos BP's out, thus denying them the possibility of a double switch because it would scout it. And then they do very little into its switch-in, and Zapdos wrests control of games. Rests with a W for those who are not native speakers and might be like, why is he saying rest, R-E-S-T? No, W-R-E-S-T. It's very forceful in that sense, and it makes powerful demands of you in the team builder. It enables its teammates. It's an amazing threat in its own right. I'm just waiting for more people to use Agility Zapdos. Talk about taking over games late game. If it's not taking advantage of Arrow with Agility, it can do so with Protect, which is also an amazing move for Metagross trying to blow up on it. Pairs really well with Toxic. Pairs insanely well with Doug Trio. Zap, Gengar, Doug, you're ripping through pretty much everything. And that's just offensive Zapdos too, which already has a million options, but defensive Zapdos is one of the best Pokemon in the tier because it's so thoroughly shuts down super passive things like Milotic And you got your pressure stall, you rest, and a lot of defensive teams that rely on just statusing everything to death, they're completely hapless against Zapdos. I had this game years and years ago where I was facing this team with a Spit of Zapdos, and it was like 5 Pokemon completely walled by the Zapdos and a T-Tar, a physical T-Tar. And what's crazy is that that kind of team could have very easily have run a special. Can my music play, please? Could have easily run a special T-Tar. So yeah, Spadev Zapdos potentially just blanks entire teams. Stuffs Mixed Ments with the Spike Up unless it runs Rock Slide, but then it's cutting into its coverage. Yeah, it's another absolutely incredible thing it can do. And even those defensive sets, they have a lot of variety to them. Sleep Talk, Light Screen is a personal favorite of mine because it makes Skarmory even more absurdly unbreakable. Yeah, Zapdos of all sorts is amazing. So, A rank, Swampert. These next ranks are still defining forces of the tier, among the best of the best, just not as instantly, I don't know about instantly game-breaking, but I guess they are a little less instantly game-breaking if you try to cheat their coverage, most of the time anyway, but, and they're a little less, I guess they're a little less outright essential to prepare explicitly for. You can more easily dance around them. Whereas being weak to Blissey or Gengar is just like, yeah, good night. There's a little more breathing room, but not really. I mean, I think they're like barely a step down, but this is what I mean with take it with a grain of salt. Because, like, yes, okay, I do think Zapdos is a step above Swampert, but not so much above Swampert. And it kind of... for me, it's kind of like ranking movies. Like, if I look at my DVD shelf right now, I'm just going to see... Okay, I have 2 French movies right on top of each other. It's like, I have Army of Shadows by Jean-Pierre Melville right above as in, like, it's sitting on top of Rafifi by Jules Dassin. So... which one do I prefer? I think I prefer Army of Shadows, but like by such a tiny margin. And at that point, it's like, okay, does it even matter? No, they're both amazing. So, yeah. So like Blissey, Gengar, Metagross, Zapdos. Yeah, I think they're just a little bit better than Swampert and friends, but not significantly so. Not to the extent where you say, oh, well, I have to be ready for Zapdos, but Salamence, yeah, forget that. I'm fine. No, in fact, Dugtrio, I think, is one of the most limiting Pokemon in the metagame. I mean, these Pokemon are all very limiting in their own right, just not to the sheer extent of, Bliss and Friends. But, Doug is absurd because it tends to limit you in the team builder more than almost anything else. I mean, it also has games where it just falls completely flat because it faces those Superman teams. In which it hopes it can get a trap off on a T-Tar or a Jirachi, best case. And it still tends to just get taken advantage of. Then there are other games, because a lot of offensive Pokemon tend to be viciously destroyed by Dugtrio. T-Tar, Metagross, Jirachi, Celebi, Heracross. If you try to get into more niche stuff, then half the reason you don't see more things like Metacham is like, oh yeah, well, it gets picked, or even offensive Starmie, it's like, yeah, they take 1% of damage and Dugtrio picks them off. It picks off weakened things like, offensive Suicune hits 40, oh, well, it's dead now because Dugtrio just removed it. So, it's one of the tier's most defining forces. So is Swampert, of course. I mean, Swampert's offensive capabilities are always getting explored more. I have a particular liking for Surf, Ice Beam, Refresh, Protect with Modest, because it lets it really dish out the offense while not giving much up on defense. And, importantly, running a Refresh Pert that can still hit hard is beautiful, not just because you're pressuring things, but because you're running an offensive Pert that isn't instantly terrified of the move Toxic. So much offense is so ruined by Toxic Jirachi, which is also why it's up here, in addition to that insane typing and Wish and Calm Mind and all the things Jirachi does. So I really value teams that have that find ways to have longevity while still having offense. Because it's easy to pack longevity if you're just going full on defense, rest, and natural cures and stuff. But on offense, you have to throw on careful lumberries and play really precisely, and so that's why I really like offensive refresh perk. Doesn't necessarily have to have protect. You could throw EQ on there. I just like protect because I tend to run it on more teams that don't really have the backup of like a Metagross, let's say. So they really appreciate it protecting and being better at dealing with like arrow double edge and stuff. So, but yeah, Swampert is Swampert. You know, checks the DD Tard, the DD Ments, the arrow. You know, you gotta contend with spikes, but Swampert is also good alongside spikes. So it's very simple, but it's, you know, essential to the tier. It's just so unbelievably good. Staves off those Metagross Meteor Mashes, of course. You don't want to just have Swampert for Metagross and nothing else, because that can very quickly go sour. But or a Swampert and nothing else for physical attackers, for example. Like you know, if Swampert gets boomed on and you're completely dead against like a T-Tar, then that's, you know, probably not good. But in that case, then you should have something else for Swampert to have backup against Metagross, but that's something else. So yeah, Swampert is good, Dugtrio is good, Salamence, I mean, everything Salamence does is amazing. And even Salamence has that T-Tar-esque quality of, even when Mence itself isn't doing damage, its ability is doing so much. Because Intimidate just slowing down every non-Metagross physical attacker is just wonderful. You know, you see T-Tar switching, Mence switching into like T-Tar and stuff. It's great. Mixed Mence, it's its most slappable set. It instantly threatens so much. I've warmed up to DD late game as long as it doesn't do stupid stuff like, you know, run 2-move coverage or have like no attack EVs. Ugh, that stuff drives me crazy. But I'm still a lover of CB Mence. I think it's absolutely incredible. And yeah, I even like Bulky Wish. Speaking of Bulky Wish, Jirachi, I mean, look, Toxic Jirachi shuts down so much. It solos so many teams that don't think they're weak to it, because it's not something you think about, like, oh, Wish Jirachi. No, yeah, I'll play around that, and then it Toxics and Fire Punches you and Wishes and Protects, and you're dead. So that's why longevity is very important. You will never have, I guess unless you run 6 Calm Minders, but even then you got other issues. But yeah, you will never have so much offense that you can overrun in Gen 3, that you can overrun Wish Tech Jirachi just through sheer force. So you got to be crafty about dealing with its status. So Arrow is vicious, late game cleaner, keeps things like Calm Mind past Celebi in check, you know, Calm Minders in general, just that fast, strong CB attack. Checks DD Tar. You know, switches into Mixed Mence if you're smart. It's actually a great Charizard counter, which is really valuable. So yeah, Arrow is terrifying. It's very simple. It's like Swampert. I don't really like the Lychee sets at all. I think they're actually terrible. But simple CB Arrow, whether you're HP Bug, HP Flying, HP Fighting, it's just a wonderful poke. And it really keeps the metagame together. So, Celebi, I have pretty highly. It's like Agility Metagross in that, yeah, it's Celebi. It's always going to be good. You know, it can go offensive, it can go defensive, it can run any mixture of attacks. But the set that's really been making people rank it highly, and a set I like myself, I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's very, very good, is Leech 3 attacks with lots of special attack and speed. A set I've been fond of for a long time, so I'm really happy to see people using it. And I don't know if there's like a set EV spread I like for it. But that's the thing about Celebi. It can do pretty much any EV spread it wants. And with the 3 attacks of Giga, Psychic, HP Fire, then you're massively threatening. And you can, you know, sometimes you don't have the time to use Calm Mind. You just want to attack. Or you want to pressure something that you otherwise wouldn't, like Blissey with Leech Seed. So, you know, and you have all the wonderful stuff that comes with Leech Seed in general. I've also seen Calm Mind, Leech, Giga, Psychic used alongside Magneton to good effect. I like that set a lot. I personally used this season in SPL, I used Leech, Giga, Fire, Recover, and I loved it. I thought it was so good. You know, because sometimes people, you know, start dropping Recover on Celebi a little too much, and then it's like, guys, it's Recover. It's insane. Yeah, Celebi has that function of being one of the few things that doesn't collapse instantly to most Zapdos, which is, I can't stress enough how good that is. And it's got that amazing set of resistances, water, electric, fighting, just wonderful. Blanking other Celebi Leech Seed is great. So yeah, Celebi does it all and does it really well. Yeah, so now the A minuses. I think there's a greater difference between the A ranks and the A minuses than the A pluses and the A's, or even the S's and the A's, to be honest. Like, everything S through A is really, really up there. Now, this is not to downplay the impact of the A minus pokes. I mean, Suicune, I have a lot of issues with it because it can never fit everything it wants on its set, and Sand and Spikes just ruin it so much. And if you want it to be a threat, you can't actually switch it into things, and there isn't much else that replicates Suicune's defensive profile. So it's like, okay, it really requires very precise play, and even then, you are not always going to be able to get as much out of it as you'd like on a consistent basis. With offensive Suicune, anyway. Now, defensive Suicune I really like, but it's also very limiting in the kinds of teams it is able to fit on. And that's another distinguishing characteristic of the Pokemon starting in this rank. S through A, you can see these Pokemon being slotted on pretty much anything, whereas A minus, the flaws start to become more apparent, or if not the flaws, then the support that they need. Like Moltres without spikes is almost just never a good idea. Very, very rarely. For example. So, and it's things like that. And Suicune is one of the best examples because it really does not get slapped on teams as easily as the stuff above it. But, of course, there is potentially nothing scarier than many variants of Suicune to many different types of teams. So you really can't be too harsh on it. If you run the offensive set and you don't rely on it too defensively, restrictive, but then, and this is another subject for another video, making good teams tends to be restrictive. So if you don't rely on it too much defensively, then it can really, really pack a wallop and really do good stuff. It's just structuring your team to where your bulky water is not really necessary as much can be kind of tough, especially early in the game when you have very limited information. So Charizard and Moltres are right behind it because they are very destructive, very unique in their destructive properties, because a lot of times you'll see things paired together like Scar, Meta, Jirachi, Celebi, just teams piling on the fire weaknesses. And with these two, then switching into Metagross Mash and instantly threatening an Oko, it's as unique as it is valuable. So, amazing traits. I personally rank Charizard a little bit higher because with Beat Up, you instantly threaten Blissey, and so you fit on teams that don't have spikes, as well as obviously being great on teams with spikes. And that higher speed tier is really, really valuable as well, going all the way up to 100. And then you also have Blaze, which means that it is actually beneficial to take hits. You actually become stronger than Moltres after a couple of Metagross Meteor Mashes. Of course, Moltres has Will-O-Wisp, the most obnoxious move in the gen. I seriously hate Will-O-Wisp. It's such an unbelievable restriction in the team builder. And of course you have that amazing initial power and better bulk as well. So I tend to prefer, Charizard's higher speed, but yeah, it's great. It's really different, and that's why, that one also really could go either way, preference-wise, what side of the bed you woke up on, all that stuff. Yeah, but I think since they're essentially the same, I don't think you can realistically rank anything else in between them. So next we have Claydol, who has jumped up a lot. That's one of the few notable shifts, because Claydol used to be pretty niche/terrible when it was only used defensively, but over time people have really started using it more offensively, not just in terms of using more offensive sets on Claydol, but using it on more offensive teams. And that means that you don't rely on Claydol to permanently keep spikes off, because if that's your game, then you're just going to get outlasted by Skarmory. And, rather than go full on Claydol and Magneton and really limiting your options, then it's better to just use other Pokemon to beat down Skarmory and then reset its pressure with Spin, make it relay those spikes, give you a lot of breathing room. It's really good. And of course, Claydol takes hits from everything pretty much. It's almost impossible to OHKO it. And has Boom, which is, of course, amazing. So it winds up against defensive stuff, then it'll... Of course, it's got Stab Psychic for Gengar, all that stuff. But against bulkier Spikes teams, then it's going to relieve some pressure. It's not going to, outlast them, but it gives you more room in which you can outmaneuver the defensive stuff. And against more offensive teams, then you are going to be checking a lot just by virtue of your bulk and the many resistances. And you will be able to bring something down with Boom. It's great. You have that great Sand and Spikes immunity as well. So yeah, now we move down to the B pluses. These pokes are much more restricted in terms of the number or the number of teams they can fit on, the type of teams they can fit on. But I still think they are quite excellent. It's just a matter of a lot of the time what makes a Pokemon good is being able to fit on different types of teams. And these Pokemon are more limited, but I still think they're excellent. Like people say that Milotic needs a spinner a lot of the time. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think Milotic has a lot of great stuff it can do. It likes not having to deal with spikes, of course, but just having a plan to deal with spike stuff is, fine as well. Of course, it naturally pairs well with Claydol because together they check a million things, so you're going to be seeing Milotic alongside Claydol more often than you're not. But, I mean, blanking things like Mixments and Moltres is just absolutely wonderful. So, checking things physically, it's amazing. But the reason I have Hariyama in B+, again, I will leave that to my video that raves about the beauty of Hariyama in Gen 3. I think it's absolutely incredible. But Knockoff is just insanely broken. And Hariyama is a great threat in its own right. It switches in on both Tyranitar and Blissey. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. And unlike other fighters, it's got a huge HP stat, so it doesn't really mind switching into Blissey's Seismic Toss. So that's a major, major boon it has over Machamp. It's got bulk. It's got two great abilities in Guts and Thick Fat. It even gains resistances with Thick Fat. Suddenly you have that Zard Fire Blast bouncing right off. You pivot into something like a Suicune Ice Beam and suddenly are taking no damage at all. And of course Guts, you don't want to status it. Or you really make Blissey pay for running T-Wave, stuff like that. Yeah, I think some sort of offensive set with bulk is great, but I mean, even if you run bulk or go all out defensive, it's still going to be threatening because of how insane Knock is. And you've got stuff like Whirlwind for sub Suicunes and Counter to punish Metagrosses that don't use Psychic. So, yeah, Hariyama's just amazing. I can't praise it highly enough. Yeah, Magneton is good in its own right if used on the right teams. I think like Scar Mag teams are really good because you facilitate Scarm itself, actually, because a lot of times Scarm is going to be the best answer to Scarm. It's kind of nuts. Scarm is kind of insane like that. But you also facilitate a lot of really dangerous Pokemon like Arrow and even something like an offensive Flygon is really, really nasty with Scarm out of the picture. So I think the wrong way to go with Magneton is just spamming D-Deers and Heracross and Metagross and stuff like that and hoping it works because it's not very consistent. It can work, doesn't tend to consistently. In a tournament setting, sure, but if you're counting on facing Skarm and friends, put it this way: if you know you're facing Skarmory, the answer is not to go Magneton plus a bunch of physical attackers. If anything, you'd rather just revel in the fact that you have a Skarmory that is not able to be answered by the opponent's Skarmory, plus things like Arrow and Flygon, or Metagross, of course. So. Yeah, Magneton enables things really nicely. Just has to be the right kind of stuff it enables. And, people tend to underrate Magneton's defensive capabilities. It resists a lot of physical attacks, so you can pivot around Choice Banders beautifully. Nothing nicer than switching Magneton into Metagross and taking it out as its CB mashes. That's why Brick Break is really good on CB Gross. Flygon is really good. It's perpetually underrated, but defensive Flygon on Superman stuff is great because that Sand and Spikes immunity, it's going to be dealing with an intrinsic part of Advance, which is Sand and Spikes and Rock Sliders. And Flygon just sits in the face of all of that. And unlike something like Claydol, it's not afraid of HP Bug, which is a lot easier to fit on something like a DD Tar than Ice Beam is. So Flygon's amazing in that sense. Alongside Magneton, it gets even better, of course, in Pursuit Tar. That just makes it even better. But I also really, like I said, I like offensive Flygon a lot. I think it's super underrated, and we should see it more. It's quite a threat, that stab EQ is really nice when invested. And with that speed and, the Rock Slide HP Bug combination, it's really nice. You can go 3 attacks sub, the UD special. You can go 3 attacks protect, 3 attacks toxic. I'm sure there's more. CB Gun is tough to pull off, but insanely rewarding if you can. But I tend to like offensive lefties. So then Starmie. Bulky Starmie on the right team is really good because it's not just dealing with spike stuff quite nicely, but also helping you stuff things like Charizard and Moltres really beautifully. Status sponging against something annoying like Status Jirachi. Offensive Starmie is an utter terror, of course. Hydro Pump, yeah, it sucks, but it's the way it cleans through so many teams with that speed and that coverage and that power and that just good enough bulk is just wonderful. I really like it alongside Claydol because when Claydol spins, you can run 3 attacks recover on your Starmie, and then you no longer have to run immediately from Blissey. You can stay in on it. You're not terrified of just taking a Seismic Toss. It's really cool. Lets you use it more defensively as well. So, yeah, now we go to B, and now I think there's also a pretty significant jump in, not in terms of how easy it is to slap these Pokemon are, but in terms of I don't think that the teams these Pokemon fit on are as consistent as the Pokemon even in B+. I think the Pokemon in B+, generally make for consistent teams. Consistent, really reliable teams. But in B, then the gap widens quite a bit. So, I still do like these Pokemon, though. I like Venusaur a lot. It can potentially be one of the most irritating things around. But, it's much more limited. Heracross, insanely threatening, quite flawed. Breloom, same thing. Fori and Cloyster, I mean, yeah, they have their good points, but competing with Skarmory is just really difficult. I do love Kingdra, though. I think it's absolutely excellent. Like, special offenses tend to really be terrified of Arrow, and nothing flips it nothing flips the script on Arrow on the special side like Kingdra does. Thing of beauty. And, yeah, it's just absolutely fantastic in how it takes physical attacks so well. Yeah, I also really like Vaporeon. I think it is super underrated. Defensive sets, yeah, I could take or leave. But Water Absorb, wonderful. And that Hydro Pump it unleashes is crazy strong. It's got a base 110 special attack. That's huge. It's the strongest Hydro Pump in the tier. And offensive sets can do all sorts of things. They can sub-pass with lefties. They can still run Wish. They can 3 attacks, Baton Pass, 3 attacks Wish, 2 attacks Wish and BP. 2 attacks Wish and Protect if you like. You can really do almost anything. You can run Salic Berry and pass that. Yeah, Vaporeon is really, really cool. Really, really underrated. Tough to fit for sure, but I do really like what it does. Yeah, not to say that these Pokemon in this rank can't be on consistent teams, of course, just not nearly as easily as those above them. Now we come to the final rank, which is B-. So, if you've seen that video of mine I made about how terrible Snorlax is, its placement dead last should not surprise you here. I really hate it. Yeah, I'm really sad about Jolteon being this low, but with Claydol being as good as it is, I don't know. Jolteon was my baby for a really long time, but it thrived in much more aggressive metagames with an emphasis on offense. And, against those teams, it's just wonderful. But as more and more players realize, yeah, bulk is generally the way to go. Even on more offensive stuff, then Jolteon really just has a tough time getting it going. So, I mean, I still like it. But it's just hard to make work with anywhere near the level of consistency it had before. Metachamp, I mean, I like insanely destructive, but fitting it nightmarish. It tends to fit on balanced teams that like to take it slow and then pop in Metachamp for surprise burst damage, but those teams tend to be really nastily vulnerable to Dugtrio. So cool Pokemon, tough to fit. Registeel I really like. Baihai and McMegan have both showed us how good Registeel is when used in an offensive capacity as a kind of second Metagross. A second Metagross that takes special hits unbelievably well. It's better than Snorlax because, it switches into Zapdos T-Bolt and can actually heal with lefties. And it's got a great move pool. Not very strong, true, but it can make up for that with its great set of tools. So yeah, I like Registeel a lot. Regice, I mean, I want to like it, but it's the low speed and the sand and spikes weakness. I mean, Registeel is slow as sin, but that healing and sand will forgive a lot of issues. And Regice just doesn't do that, and it doesn't hit nearly as hard as it needs to overcome that. I mean, it gets stifled by Metagross so badly. Jirachi doesn't do great against T-Tar. I mean, yeah. I do like what it can do sometimes. It just doesn't do that consistently enough. Steelix. I do like Steelix because it's also like a second Metagross, but one that answers Zapdos, whether grass or ice. Really specific because you gotta have that heavy anti-Scarm coverage, whether you're running a more offensive or defensive team. It does fit onto both. But since it does fit onto both and it does some really cool things, then I like it there. Really good alongside the Intimidators, of course, just like Metagross is. But, yeah. And speaking of the Intimidators, I have Gara ahead of Lax because I want to like Gara as well. It has such cool traits, but it's so weak. And if you want to sweep with it, you can actually switch it into things. And, I do think there's potential for Gara. It's just, yeah, I just find it is a chronic underperformer. So, now we will quickly go over the Pokemon that I did not rank just because personal preference. Like, yes, I do acknowledge that some of these things have a niche. Like, I mentioned Misdreavus before. Yeah, and obviously I think like Raikou and stuff has a niche, but it's just not really in my wheelhouse. Not stuff that I really consider something I would, I'm not going to say not good, but something that I wouldn't really like to use. Like Misdreavus stuff, I acknowledge it for sure. It's the most notable thing I didn't rank. I'm just not a huge fan because it mostly blanks Claydol, which is great, but I think I generally prefer stuff that does more. So Alakazam I think is underrated. I think just running 4 attacks is the way to go with it. Psychic, Fire, Ice, Grass. You don't try to call mine or do anything fancy. You just hit as many things as you can super effectively and use it like a Starmie that speed ties Dugtrio, that outruns Jolly T-Tar, that isn't afraid of the move Thunderbolt, or Hidden Power Grass for that matter. So I do think that Zam has that going for it, and Synchronize is obviously an incredible ability. I mean, very limited in how it's going to be used, of course, but I do think it has potential. I mean, stuff like Encore is going to be cool as well. Trick is not really going to be doing much because, you tricked the T-Tar or Metagross Choice Band. Yeah, that's going to be awesome. Trick and Blissey, obviously cool, but as soon as the sand goes off... See, another reason why sand is important. Stupid stuff like this. The dumbness factor of random stupid stuff goes up a million when there's no sand in play. Like reversal Heracrosses and stuff like that. And, yeah, so I do think there is a place for Zam, but, yeah. Machamp I like a lot, actually. I do think it has its place because it hits very hard. It's got a good speed tier. Faster than Yam is really nice. You can't status it because of Guts. Just enough bulk, especially with bulk up, taking away physical revenge killing. So I like Champ. Regirock I think is really cool in the second Metagross genre of Pokemon. I think Regirock is really up there. CB Superpower is great. And yeah, I had a couple of Regirock teams I really liked a few years ago, actually. Curse Boom, CB, I'm sure can do other stuff with Counter and T-Wave. Yeah, I like Regirock. I like Armaldo too because I don't love its offensive output as much, but nor its defensive traits because it's hard to fit on teams because it's kind of awkward with that defensive profile. But the way it can check things like Celebi and Jirachi really nicely, and being a knockoff user immune to sand is just wonderful. It stuffs Snorlax really nicely. Yeah, very cool Pokemon. Articuno has some sort of niche, but I just don't think it fits on teams that I really like. So Raikou, so much potential, so obscenely difficult to make work consistently. Blaziken is kind of heresy for me to not rank. It's just, I don't know, it's really hard to have that whole Spikes Dugtrio weakness in there when you've got Charizard doing the mix thing so well. Yeah, it definitely has a niche, that lack of T-Bolt weakness is really nice, but, and of course, stab fighting to chase away T-Tars, but, yeah, the whole EQ weakness just, yeah. Camerupt, I want it to be good, but it's so slow and so frail and not strong enough, and yeah, it gets ugly. Donphan, I think, is very good. I do really like it. It's insanely specific to fit, talk about needing Magneton and Pursuit Tar and Spikes, but it's very cool, I think. Dragonite, I kind of like. It does cool stuff with Heal Bell, which is super appreciated on offense. I mean, I've spent time complaining about Will-O-Wisp and status from Jirachi, and yeah, you got Heal Bell on Dragonite, of course, that's amazing. But tough to make work, for sure. Because it's like, do I use the worst Ments? Do I use it alongside Ments? And either way, you're going to be feeling some awkwardness in the team builder with that lower power level and speed, or the compounded weaknesses. But it does have a lot of potential. Dusclops like Misdreavus, but I like it even less because of that whole Spikes thing. Yeah, I actually like Exeggutor. I think it's very cool. It's that speed stat, and that it's just good enough. It's the Machamp thing. It's the whole terrible Spadef that kind of turns me off, and the fact that it really has so many good moves but can't fit them all. I think I like Giga Psychic Fire Explosion. Like a Celebi that can boom. It doesn't have the special bulk of Celebi at all. Forget switching this thing into Zapdos T-Bolt, but yeah, I'm sure you could do things with Sleep Powder and, maybe even Wish. No, I don't think it can run Wish effectively. But yeah, Eggy can do some cool stuff potentially. I wish Electabuzz was good. It's so cool. It's got an amazing speed stat. Above the 100s is just wonderful. I think it's just too weak and frail. Gardevoir, I want to like Gardevoir. Tracing Dugtrio, and then not arena trapping, icy winding it, so you actually KO it back. You slow it down and then you KO on the second attack. That's really, really cool. It's got Will-O-Wisp, Destiny Bond, Wish, good special attack, obviously, and Stab Psychic. Yeah, I really want to like Gardevoir. It's just so hard to fit. Glalie lead, I think it just, the Suicide Spikers like Glalie and Smeargle just tend to be underwhelming. It's generally just better to run Skarmory. You can keep Skarmory in on stuff and just have a better Pokemon as opposed to running these Spikers that get up the layer of spikes, and then the game is so fast that the spikes layer winds up not being too big anyway, because they literally just do get the spike in most games. Smeargle, you at least shut something down with Spore on a good day. Still tough to make work. And going suicidal with your Spiker is really tough to pull off when Claydol is so famously difficult to take out of the picture. Golduck, I think, is really cool. Cloud9 is awesome. So you're not bothered by sand, and you can run items like Salic Berry. So you can run like Calm Mind Salic, and yeah, I think there is a small place for that. Don't like Houndoom very much just because I think it's a cool Pokemon. It's fitting it onto a team. That's a lot of what is tough about certain Pokemon. They might have amazing qualities, but actually fitting it out on a team, that gets awkward. But I mean, it's tough to deny Houndoom's traits. I mean, Stab Fire, good speed, Stab Crunch and Pursuit, Will-O-Wisp. It's got a lot of stuff to love. Just tough to fit. Jumpluff I like, but talk about tough to fit. Jinx I like. I think it's quite good. Lead Jinx is all the rage, but I think if you bring Jinx in later in the game in a more controlled kind of way, rather than banking on the lead matchup, then it can do some really nasty things, especially because they're not going to, it's more unexpected, first of all, and sleeping things once stuff has already been set in motion means that Jinx's follow-up is going to be more impactful and you're more able to take advantage of it. That's an idea. Ludicolo, I think, is cool. I wish Kabutops was better, but, you know, Rock Slide Flail is just such flawed coverage. Ludicolo, I think, is pretty good. Not as good as Kingdra. I think it should be used alongside it. And I don't even know if Swift Swim Sweeper is really the way to go with Ludicolo. That special attack stat is surprisingly underwhelming, but I do like it when it runs Leech Seed. I think it can be insanely annoying with that. Marowak, I liked before, don't really love it now. Yeah, it's tough to fit. Generally wind up preferring T-Tar in that slot, honestly. Or even Rhydon. Miltank, I wonder if there's something to Miltank. Muck, hey, Sticky Hold. It got Sticky Hold, right? In this gen. So yeah, it's immune to knockoff. No, it's not good. The Nido twins, I think, can make something work for sure. You know, really interesting move pools and speed tiers and typings. You know, taking on Zapdos and fighting types. I mean, really flawed typings, too. Those weaknesses to Dugtrio and Psychic and Ice are not insignificant. And, you know, to say nothing of Water, but they might be able to pull something off. Omastar, underwhelming. No, I'm sorry. It's not Vaporeon with the strongest Hydro Pump around. It is Omastar. But Vaporeon actually gets a chance to use Hydro Pump a lot more than Omastar does by virtue of its much better typing. So it is effectively, technically, you know. So yeah, Omastar is a terrifying Swift Swim Sweeper, but it's so hard to get it to work because everything hits it for lethal or near lethal damage. So Politoed I like. You know, it's got some cool tools with Thief and Hypnosis and Water Absorb or Damp, but if you switch in on a Pokemon exploding, then the Pokemon exploding doesn't actually KO. So you would much rather your opponent trade their Metagross for your Politoed than keep their Metagross alive, you know, while switching Politoed in. And Water Absorb is a great ability in general. So Politoed can do some cool stuff for offense. I want to like Quagsire, but it's so awkward to fit. You know, that whole Swampert that's also water immune thing tends to underwhelm sometimes, but I'm sure it can do something. Rhydon, those weaknesses are so bad, but I think there might be something to it. Sableye gets knockoff. So does Banette. I don't know. In terms of like alternative ghosts, I don't know. I'm not really. I think I'm more a fan of Haunter as a second ghost than these others. I actually do like Haunter quite a bit. Sceptile, some great quality, that speed stat. But Leaf Blade is 70 base power in this gen, not 90, so it's really weak. Maybe some stuff with Leech Seed, I don't know. Scizor can do some cool stuff, but ultimately so flawed in its coverage and underwhelming speed. And yeah, but I do like it, though. That whole reversal sand immune thing is pretty gnarly. Slacking is bad, sadly. Smeargle I already talked about with the Glalie thing. I wish Tauros is better. Tauros is so cool. Umbreon, yeah, bouncing back Gengar Will-O-Wisp and just ruining it is quite good. But other than that, it's so passive. And it's hard to fit. That's the thing. You pretty much only do anything else with it in non-Gengar setups if the opponent automatically loses to Toxic and Wish and Protect. And if that's the case, they're going to lose a Jirachi too. So there's a reason why Umbreon's not used very much, because you generally prefer Gengar answers that are more well-rounded than just dealing with Gengar, even if Umbreon is better at dealing with Gengar itself. You know, it doesn't even fear Focus Punch. It does nothing. Ursaring is actually kind of cool. Wailord, kind of cool. I do like Weezing. I think Weezing's been slept on a little too much, but I think it's very, very interesting. Especially, I like Pain Split Weezing because with Pain Split, it is maybe the only Pokemon in the tier that turns switching into Hariyama's knockoff and losing HP from it in Sand into a positive. Because the more HP Weezing loses once it's been knocked off, then the more HP it drains from you with Pain Split. So yeah, I do like Weezing for that. I think it has a lot of really cool things it could do. I like Taunt, Wisp, Pain Split, Boom, but it's got an amazing move pool, good set of resists, good stats, yeah. And Roselia, I like as an alternative Spiker just because that whole dealing with Zapdos thing is cool. Aromatherapy is amazing. Helping out with status is wonderful. You spike all over. I mean, being afraid of Dugtrio the way it is so stupid, but hey, Leech Seed, Stun Spore, Aromatherapy, helping with Zapdos and Milotic, those are good things. So, yeah. Flareon, I think that, it got used like once a couple of years ago, and then people realized, yeah, no, this thing's kind of silly, but it's cute. Yeah, so that's pretty much, and I went over Mr. Davis already. So that's pretty much everything. Thank you guys for watching, or listening. I hope this was enjoyable for you to fall asleep to, or whatever. And I hope this was informative for the advanced people as well. Thank you, and I will see you in the next one.